He used to be the loneliest orphan, but gets trapped with his crush in a post-apocalyptic world. Maru is a young ugly dude in post-apocalyptic Japan, who is such a loser that he has a female bodyguard to protect him named Kuruko, who refuses to sleep with him even though he's one of the last guys around. They are on a mission to explore the empty streets of what used to be Japan to look for a place called Heaven. One day, they break into an abandoned house which turns out to be super fancy and full of supplies. Maru makes Kuruko go to the kitchen where she belongs and make him some food. She decides to use the weeds growing outside to make some edibles, but it just ends up being bitter instead of making him high. Still, he forces himself to finish the food because he's a swallower, not a spitter. Later that night, they decide to stay the night in the house when he notices her staring at a picture of two guys much hotter than him, which makes him super jealous. She convinces him that one of them is someone she's looking for and the other is just a friend, which is the same thing that my ex told me before she left me. The next day, the pair decides to follow the railroad tracks to look for other people and get more info about their mystery destination. They are unexpectedly ambushed by a bunch of ugly old men who wet their pants out of excitement after seeing two girls after a long time. Maru reveals that he's a guy, but the ugly bastards are so down bad that they'll practice on him for their future jail time. Kuruko pulls out a gun and threatens to shoot like a true American, which causes the men to back off, but the ugliest of the bunch looks closely and notices that the gun looks fake. She hides the gun, which makes them believe that she is only bluffing, at which point she yells at Maru to run. She immediately starts climbing the tall fence, prompting the men to run toward them with their weapons. The first guy swings his crowbar at Maru's head, but he dodges it at the last second and kicks him in the groin. He grabs the dude's arm and kicks his ass before climbing the fence and launching himself at the crowbar dude again. At that moment, Kuruko shoots her gun at a telephone pole, which immediately melts at the point of contact and falls right next to the other men. She points the gun at them and threatens to turn them into Korean BBQ unless they tell her everything they know about a place called Heaven. They bring the pair back to their shelter, which used to be a hospital. Kuruko is relieved to find a generator there and requests them to let her use it to charge a battery. They refuse at first, but quickly agree at gunpoint. Nobody seems to have heard anything about Heaven until the helmet dude shows up with a map, saying that he knows of a place called Tomato Heaven. Once the battery is charged, Mura and Kuruko thank the men and reveal that the battery was for the gun, causing the dumbasses to become furious that they were fooled into helping them. Elsewhere in an unknown place, a young girl named Tokyo goes to school where she is slapped with a surprise math test. She panics because she hasn't studied and the teacher this time is a robot, so she can't get her good grades the way she usually does. While she doodles over the questions, she notices a glitch on the screen and an extra question appears in front of her which reads, "Do you want to go beyond the outside?" After the exam, she goes to her friend Mimiheim to tell her about the strange incident. Mimiheim, who is an Attack on Titan fan, takes her to the walls surrounding their enclosed school and says that she has always believed there is a whole other world outside the walls. She claims that when she imagines exploring beyond, she sees two people who help her, one of which looks a lot like Tokyo. Later that night, Tokyo takes a walk outside because she finds it difficult to sleep with so many thoughts spinning in her head. The Schul's director finds her and asks her what's wrong, to which Tokyo asks if there's a world outside the school. Knowing that she'll find out sooner or later, the director reveals that there is a world filled with horrors outside which they call Hell. Meanwhile, Maru and Kuruko make their way through the deserted countryside towards Tomato Heaven, but Kuruko is too exhausted to move further without a break. Luckily, they encounter an inn that is still run by a sweet woman. She happily agrees to give them lodging for very little money and a set of double-A batteries, which are very rare these days. Kuruko shows her the pictures of the two men from earlier and asks if they came by, revealing that the younger one's name is Robin and that she doesn't know the older Dilf's name because she was only allowed to call him Daddy. Sadly, the owner neither recognizes them nor finds them in her guest records. After that, they unwind and freshen up in peace while the owner cooks them a hot stew. Maru notices a gun case and asks her about it, to which she answers that she keeps it because there's a monster lurking in the area and that they shouldn't wander outside at night. Both of them snap to attention and ask her if she's talking about a maneater, which are creatures that have indescribable faces and eat people. Maru offers to kill it with the help of their gun, but the owner suddenly seems very tense and quietly walks away. Later that evening, she serves them the delicious boar stew which they gratefully devour while she asks them where they came from. Kuruko answers that she is originally from Tokyo and that she is only with Maru as she was given a job by her employer to be his bodyguard during his travels. He gets so tired of her rejecting him for no reason that he gives her the silent treatment later that night and moves his futon away from her. She tries to find out what's wrong, but he's already sound asleep. As soon as she switches off the lights, a wave of drowsiness sweeps her off her feet and she collapses onto her bed. She wakes up from her deep sleep to see multiple eyes staring at her through the window. She nervously reaches for the gun, but it disappears in an instant. Maru wakes up with great difficulty and lets Kuruko lead the way, who guesses that the owner slipped some drugs into their food to make them sleep. They run into her outside the inn where she has her rifle pointing into the darkness. She urgently tells them to go back inside, but Maru tries to convince her that they can kill the man-eater for her. At that moment, his flashlight catches a shadow zip over them and land behind a broken-down car. After losing track of the beast, he and Kuruko turn their backs to each other and circle around with their flashlights. Suddenly, a blue light zooms toward them and almost clashes with Kuruko. They find themselves face to face with a giant winged monster with a star-shaped face. Maru throws a barrel at it, only for it to be destroyed before even coming close to the nightmare bird, making him realize that it has long whip-like parts. It moves away from the flashlight's beam and runs straight at him, but Kuruko luckily pushes him away in time. The whips instead end up striking the car, which causes it to explode. While the beast recovers from the blast, Maru tells Kuruko that the man-eater has 3 whips on each arm, which they'll need to get rid of so he can get close enough to kill it. While they argue over who goes first because they're both the angry bird decides for them by cornering them in their hiding place. They run for their lives until Kuruko finds a turning where they change their direction, allowing her to turn around and make a perfect shot with her gun, which destroys one of the beast's arms and wings. Next, Maru flashes the torch on and off to attract the ugly turkey, while Kuruko hides behind a truck to sneak another shot at it. As it slowly walks toward him, she aims her second shot, but just when she's about to hit the trigger, the owner grabs her, causing her to miss. She quickly readies another shot, but the gun fails to fire. The owner runs over to the beast as if to protect it and yells at them to stop because the beast is her son. She explains that her son was eaten by the monster, but after that, he took over its body. Kuruko tries to snap her out of her delulu, but the owner insists that the monster protects her and has even saved her when she was attacked in the past. To Maru's surprise, Kuruko decides to believe her, and they watch as she gently holds the monster's face. For a while, it looks like they understand each other, but suddenly, the beast unleashes its whips and instantly chops her into pieces. Kuruko calmly points out that the beast can only swing its whips in one direction, so there's a pause between its attacks. Maru is disturbed over how she's so unbothered to see a human being eaten, but shuts up after seeing a tear fall down her cheek. He wipes it away like a Chad and tells her that he'll kill it now. He approaches it slowly until the beast finishes its dinner and swings its whip toward him. After that, he bolts towards it, timing his dodges with the intervals between its attacks. He grabs tightly onto one of its legs and presses his palm over its flesh, which allows him to use his special power of invading the man-eater's insides and crushing its vital part called the core, instantly killing it. The next day, he and Kuruko continue their journey toward Tomato Heaven, reaching a city that had been completely flooded by several hundred feet of water during the Great Disaster. They use a raft to row toward their destination, which is just across the water. Once they reach the other side, they find a giant field of crops, but it's still unclear whether this is the heaven they're looking for. Maru explains that his mission is to find someone who looks just like him in heaven and inject them with a drug he was given because it'll help everybody, but he doesn't know what that means. Soon after, they are greeted by the friendly locals of the area who invite them to meet the leader named Kukasebe. He and his wife give the typical welcome speech of your everyday cult, explaining their land as a refuge for people who want to live a simple life after the apocalyptic tragedy. Maru eats the up, but Kuruko remains alert because something about the place seems off. Suddenly, a man yells out that he recognizes Kuruko, claiming that she looks exactly like a celebrity race car driver named Kuriko. She denies the allegations like everyone on Epstein's list, but he shows Maru a photo of a woman who looks exactly like her except for the hair color. The man says he's glad to finally find out where she went after she accidentally killed her brother during a race 5 years ago. This seems to hit a nerve, so Maru quickly changes the subject to the strange logo on a box, realizing that it's the same symbol on Kuruko's gun. They ask the man where they got the box from, but he says there's no way to know because they trade with a bunch of merchants from different places in Tokyo. Since the gun is tied to Maru's place of origin, they decide to figure out what the logo means by heading back to Tokyo on the next ship heading there. On the ship, seasickness hits Maru hard and he ends up confessing his feelings to Kuruko. She rejects him, explaining that even though she has the body of a woman, Her mind is that of man. So guess what? If you liked her, you're gay. She opens up about her past when she and her younger brother Haruki lived in an orphanage run by the same old doctor in the photo whom everyone used to call Daddy. She was a successful electro kart racer, while her brother was basically being groomed by an older guy named Robin, who was part of a gang that hunted down man-eaters. Rumors were going around in the orphanage that Daddy, who was a doctor, was also researching the monsters. 5 years ago, Haruki joined Robin's gang for a man-eater hunt where he was as useful as an NPC, but ended up thinking he was an absolute Sigma after that. On a race day, he spotted an invisible man-eater walking at the end of the track. Worried that Kuruko would run right into it, he went to kill it on his own with his tiny crossbow. His useless arrow did nothing but piss the man-eater off, and it began eating him slowly. Eventually, the electro carts reached the area and Kuruko, who was in the lead, immediately stopped the race after seeing the man-eater, only to realize that it was eating Haruki's ass. She sped her cart right at it, but she was flung into the air on impact, barely leaving a scratch on the monster. She used all her strength to pull out what was left of Haruki's body from its mouth, after which the man-eater gave up and left. With only half of his torso remaining, it seemed too late, but Haruki's eyes opened to see Kuruko holding him tight and sobbing uncontrollably. Suddenly, a gunshot was heard and everything went black. The next time he opened his eyes, he found himself in his sister's body at a hospital. Everyone was gaslighting him into thinking he was Kuruko and that Haruki had died after the man-eater attack. But he knew he was being lied to, and the only person who can tell him why his sister had to die and why he has to live in her body is the person who saved his life. It turns out that it was none other than Big Daddy who operated on them, and had apparently left without saying a word immediately after. Once he had healed and was released from the hospital, he immediately went to the orphanage only to find it had shut down. The locals said that a series of disappearances following the man-eater incident had hit the area hard, and Robin was apparently murdered. Daddy also was nowhere to be found, leading to the closure of the orphanage. He couldn't find any evidence of Robin's death, so he believed he was still out there and the only one who could help him. From that point on, Haruki lived on as Kuruko and did odd jobs all over Japan in search of Robin and Daddy. 4 years later, she met Maru and accepted the job of being his bodyguard. After hearing her story, Maru offers his support and asks her if it's still okay to call her a girl, to which she answers that she identifies as an Apache helicopter, so any pronouns are okay. Maru is in the middle of his sexuality crisis when a man suddenly starts screaming. The two run toward him and see a huge fish with red eyes peeking into the ship. Kuruko shoots it point blank, but it ends up not having any effect because the monster has a thick water coating to protect it. While every sane person worries about barricading the ship until they reach ashore, Kuruko thinks their best chance is to fight it inside. She reasons that the mega fish must need access to water to make its water suit, and it'd be easier to fight it in a maze-like area like the ship interior because it only attacks in straight lines. She and Maru lure the slimy beast on board and run further into the ship, making sure that it is following them. They narrowly dodge a strong water cannon from its mouth and bring it below the deck. They quickly hit a dead end and Maru desperately tries to open the locked door out, but Kuruko tells him to find his balls and chill out. He looks behind in disbelief but realizes that as the fish is approaching them, all the weed the ship was illegally carrying in the boxes downstairs are sucking up the water in its coating, proving that drugs are good kids. Eventually, the fish completely dries up and collapses, allowing Maru to use his special Maru touch and destroy its core. Back in the school, Tokyo meets the weirdo in her class named Cuckoo, who has promised to show her a secret place. They make it all the way to the boundary of the campus, at a particular site of the walls where there is a vent high up. Cuckoo uses her imposter skills from Among Us to climb the wall and enter the vent, and Tokyo uses one of the futuristic Roombas to scale the wall. She hopes they're going to peek into the boys' locker room, but instead, Cuckoo takes her into a creepy room filled with alien-looking babies. She tries to touch one of them, but an intruder detecting alarm goes off, causing Cuckoo to jump into the vent and abandon Tokyo. She clenches her butt hard and stays as still as possible, causing the alarm to stop. Miraculously, nobody comes to bust her, so Cuckoo quickly helps her up the vent, and they scurry back into the school. The next day, Tokyo visits her friend Tarao, who is bedridden due to a chronic illness. He tries to use his big pity card to make a move on her, but she's disgusted by his scrawny ass and runs away. The school's dream boy Kona finds her crying and asks her what's wrong. She starts talking about how her classmates have been acting so weird and down bad recently, to which he says that it's a natural part of growing up and gives her the talk. After listening to him, she says that if she ever likes someone, she would want it to be him, and he says that he feels the same. Meanwhile, the rejection hits Incel Tairao so hard that he enters critical condition that night and requests the authorities to let him see Tokyo privately. She rushes to his room, and once they are alone, he whispers that she should run away from this place because it is dangerous. The next day, Tairao is declared dead and a funeral is held for him at the square. He is the second tragic death of the school, following a girl named Asura, who stopped her own life for unknown reasons. Meanwhile, the ship finally reaches the shore, and the captain thanks Maru and Kuruko for defeating the maneater. They ask the crew if they recognize the bird logo on Kuruko's gun, and luckily, one of the men identifies it as the logo of a town named Mitsuba and gives them directions to reach it. When they finally arrive, they find a completely demolished and abandoned town with a poorly made graffiti art of a chicken. Maru makes the best out of their dead end by finding packets of some mystery sweet food named yauken, with which they make a tasty soup. The next day, they thankfully reach a town with actual people in them. Maru goes to an arcade to play video games and fill the void in his heart from finding out the girl he likes is actually a guy. A bunch of thugs think he is a clueless outsider and try to mess with him, but he gives no shits and straight up punches and kicks down the dude who tries to grab him. Post-nut clarity hits him, and he apologizes, but the dude kicks one of his teeth in, which gives him the full right to beat the shit out of all of them. Kuruko happens to walk into the scene and throws a few punches in for shits and giggles, and they run away. Later they have a heart-to-heart talk where Maru tells Kuruko about his childhood. He was born in the year that the great disaster occurred, and his first memories are all in an orphanage in an unknown town where he lived relatively peaceful days. However, when he turned 7, all the kids were split into groups, each led by an adult. After 3 years, his leader was killed over a turf war, and the gang leader who killed him took them in and raised them as gangsters. He stayed with the gang until a woman named Mikira took him in and taught him how to use Maru touch to kill man-eaters during their travels. Kuruko asks if Mikira also had similar powers, but he claims she told him that he's the only one who has the touch, which is why he needs to go to heaven. After that, Kuruko goes to the market to sell books she found in the room next door. She returns with an interesting map she bought after selling all the books. The map's seller marked different places with a score based on the water quality and taste. Desperate to use any leads, they decide to stop by the place with a 100% Yelp rating, because heaven surely should have 100% water satisfaction. At that moment, they hear footsteps in the building, making them worry that the gang tracked them down to enact revenge. The intruder walks right to their apartment and knocks on their door. They stay silent, but the knocks continue until a man yells out that he knows they are in there and that they should let him in because he was on the ship with them. After letting him in, the man requests them to provide him protection until he reaches the Immortal Order, a place where a doctor gives people immortal life. Kuruko highly suspects that the doctor is none other than Daddy and asks him for all the info he knows. He explains that he has never been there before, nor has he seen the doctor's face, but he heard that the doc confused small parts of man-eaters into human bodies to make them powerful and immortal. He excitedly takes out a big jar from his bag only to realize that the fish monster part he kept in it has already gone from sushi to kimchi. Kuruko offers him cash to wipe his tears with in exchange for the Immortal Order's location. The place turns out to be just a short distance away from the 100% safe water town, so they decide to check out the water hype first and then visit the Immortal Address crib, which just happens to be marked in their map as Weird AF People. The map leads them to yet another wasteland where they are approached by a young lady who eagerly offers them lodging. They decline at first, but Kuruko notices her looking sad, so she agrees to rent 2 rooms to keep their belongings while they find the 100% safe water. When asked about where they can get such pristine water, the woman doesn't really know what they're talking about, but suggests they check out an underground entrance up ahead where water often collects. Once they find it, the water doesn't look nearly as clean as promised. Maru spots a man collapsed in the basement and rushes to his aid, but his wounds look deep and gruesome. The man is still conscious, and he uses the last of his strength to ask them to save his friend from the man-eater that attacked them. Kuruko looks around with her flashlight and finds the friend's already dead body in the water. Immediately after, she notices the bear man-eater close by, and it begins chasing them. They run out of the basement with Kuruko on the lead. She turns back and shoots 2 beams at a huge concrete pillar, causing it to fall over the monster and knock it out cold. Maru uses the opportunity to kill it with his touch, but nothing happens. They stare in confusion until it opens its eyes and begins chasing them again, making them realize that it isn't a man-eater, but an actual brown bear, which is arguably scarier. They manage to climb up another pillar to save themselves, but the bear still watches them from below. Time passes and the bear is finally out of their sight at sunset, but they're still worried it's around somewhere. Kuruko takes the battery out of her gun to warm it up in case she needs to use her last shot on it, but it slips out of her hands and falls way down below. Maru outright rejects her request to go and retrieve it, but after she bribes him with the offer of letting him touch her melons, he parkers the descent and grabs the battery in 2 seconds. However, the bear reveals itself from behind a car and Maru just barely makes it back to the pillar thanks to his lightning speed. Realizing there's no other way out of this, Kuruko requests him to go back down and kill it with her gun, because she's too chicken to climb down after realizing how high up they are. After he kills it, she'll just jump and use the bear's body as a cushion from the impact. However, Maru points out that even if she gives him the gun, there's no guarantee he'll hit the bear because his aim isn't as perfect as hers. He asserts that he would have died at least 5 times already if it wasn't for her, which gives her the validation she always craved from Robin, so she agrees to come up with a new plan. As per their plan, Maru first jumps down and then catches Kuruko, who jumps after him. After she lands, he runs as far as he can while the bear runs toward her. She prays that the final bullet will fire before pulling the trigger, and thankfully, it hits the bear right in the head and kills it instantly. Maru carefully walks toward its body with a rock just in case, causing Kuruko to yell at him for not running away, to which he retorts that he's disappointed she'd actually believe he'd run away and leave her alone. After that, they bring the wounded man in the basement back with them for medical attention and stay the night in the rented rooms. Kuruko reveals that they were tricked by the previous town's thugs into coming here, guessing that the map seller was in on it and only marked this place with 100% safe water with the hope that they'd go there and fall victim to the bear. Turned on by her smartness, Maru makes her deliver on her promise to let him touch her chesticles, but all the noise alerts the owner, who drags him into his own room because it's against the rules to make a mess. Over at the school, Tokyo worries that Terao passed his cooties to her because she threw up after his funeral. However, the robot nurse assures her there's no sign of illness and prescribes her a nap at the infirmary. During her sleep, she has a nightmare where she sees Asura's ghost floating above her, while red sores spread across her legs. After being released from the clinic the next day, she goes to Kona's room, and they watch Netflix together. That's definitely all that they do. Now back to the two dumbasses. Maru and Kuruko make a sign saying that they hunt man-eaters with the hope of getting the attention of the Immortal Order. Just like an OnlyFans model selling feet pics online, the sign attracts some old men at night, who tell the two to follow them. They are brought to a shady hideout, where Kuruko asks to see Daddy, but they quickly realize that these people are not from the Immortal Order. They reveal that they're a humanitarian group called Livamun, which is working against the Order because they operate under the guise of a hospital, but use their patients for human experiments where they try to join machine parts into people for the likely purpose of eventually figuring out how to transfer human brains into machines. The leader Mizu recounts her experience in the hospital, where she accidentally walked into one of the operating rooms and saw a human body chopped up into pieces and being kept alive by machines. When it saw her, it asked her to let it die. They explain that their mission is to raise awareness against the inhumane acts of the Order, which is led by a doctor named Usami, before their methods dominate the rest of the world. Kuruko asks if the Dr. Usami is Daddy, but they claim that Usami is much younger than the man in the photo. She tells them that they heard the Order transplants man-eater parts into humans, which turns out to be new information for them. However, this makes perfect sense to them because they know that the Order has been keeping a man-eater in their basement. They reveal that the reason they called the pair here is because they saw their sign and wanted to pay them to kill it. Kuruko immediately accepts their offer, but Maru thinks she's not being as cool-headed as she usually is because she's so focused on finding Daddy and getting justice for her dead sister. The next day, Maru and Kuruko prepare for their mission while they hear Mizu rally her group outside the Immortal Order's building. Once it turns into a large demonstration, it acts as a distraction, allowing Maru and Kuruko to infiltrate the basement from the back entrance, which is guarded by a man who is also a part of Livamun. Once they reach the basement, they find a brightly lit parking lot, but no sign of a man-eater. Maru says that he's been having a weird feeling about this whole thing for a while because it feels like they're being set up just like the bear incident. He wonders why the man who came to them with the rotted man-eater parts had to go through so much trouble to find those parts if the Immortal Order has their own monster. He suspects that they've been trapped here to be experimented on like the chopped-up body the woman talked about. Kuruko tenses up, thinking that they've been trapped in a closed space with released toxic gas, but soon notices a weird object on the hood of a car. Judging by its vaguely animal-like shape, they guess it's a dormant man-eater, and sure enough, after Maru touches it, he detects its core and crushes it. They relax after realizing that his suspicions were proved wrong, but soon discover another dormant man-eater. They scout the entire parking lot to kill the monsters one by one and eventually come across a giant super gross looking dormant man-eater. They guess that all the little ones spawned from the giant one, but Maru still doesn't understand why they're frozen. Kuruko explains that when man-eaters are on the verge of death, they play dead to preserve their energy, which means they haven't been fed ever since they've been kept here. Their presence is detected by the dormant man-eaters, and one of the small ones comes out of its coma state. Kuruko shoots at it but misses and loses sight of it. It reappears from the ground right in front of her feet, and she narrowly escapes its grasp. Multiple emerge from the walls at once and tackle them, causing Maru to immediately become overpowered. Kuruko tries to struggle and shoot at them, but her beams have no effect on them. One of them crawls over her and uses its metallic mouthparts to chomp down on her right arm. She begins to bleed out and loses consciousness. When she opens her eyes again, she finds Maru giving her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He tries to calm her down by assuring her that there's nothing in here. She tries to recompose herself and wonders if she hallucinated everything. Maru explains that she just began shooting out of nowhere and flailing violently after seeing the freakishly giant man-eater. After making her rest, he goes to kill all of them. Once he's done, a man with an eye patch approaches them and asks them to kill one another subject for him. Before they agree, they ask him who he is, to which he reveals that he is Dr. Uzami. They follow him upstairs to find a modest hospital for injured people with prosthetic parts who seem to respect Dr. Uzami. Before taking them inside a room, he asks them to try and kill the person inside the same way Maru killed the dormant man-eaters. Once inside, he draws the curtains to reveal a chopped-up body being kept alive by machines the same way Mizu had described. Kuruko asks why he hasn't just pulled the plugs on this person if he wanted her to die. The doctor answers that if he did so, she would turn into one of those monsters that they came across in the basement. He claims that man-eaters are former humans who turn into monsters after being infected by a deadly disease. He has been trying to extend the lives of infected humans before they turn into monsters by cutting off the affected parts. However, the patients always relapse, leading to a chain of amputations and machine replacement until the body reaches its limits. He requests Maru to try and kill this patient named Hashio with his special touch so that she may die as a human. Maru touches her and immediately feels her core, confirming that he can do the job. However, before he agrees, he asks what Hashio wants. She uses a tablet to communicate with them, saying that she wants to see the sky one last time. The doc says that it isn't possible because she needs to be connected to the machine at all times, but Kuruko insists that they at least take her to the sunlight right outside her room. Slowly, they carry her and all the machines that keep her alive outside to fulfill her last wish. Meanwhile, the Livamon protesters get riled up and someone in the crowd throws a stone at one of the order members. They throw a stone back in retaliation, which grazes above Mizu's head, causing her to fall and lose consciousness, after which the rally immediately retreats. The higher-ups among the protesters carry Mizu back to the base, and the new stand-in leader decides to use this opportunity to claim that she died and that they must avenge her by destroying the order. Once they reach the building, the guard who is secretly part of Livamon goes to reunite with them, but the leader and his insider allies kill him as a statement for the protesters. The violence quickly spreads into the hospital, where the patients strong enough to fight stay back to defend the place while the others evacuate. The shouting can be heard all the way to the isolated place where the poor patient watches the calm blue sky. Dr. Uzami looks at her with sadness in his eyes, and after they exchange a knowing look, he asks Maru to finish the deed. Maru gently touches her and looks into her soul, where he finds her tiny core and clenches it tight until she passes away. Uzami wonders if he should have let her become a monster after all instead of making her suffer for so long, but Kuruko shows him Hashio's last message, which thanks him for giving back her sight by donating his eye and letting her die as a human. Finally, she confesses her love for him, causing Uzami to break down in tears. He carries her body to the others, who have gathered outside the hospital after the riots. Kuruko shows the two photographs to them to ask if anybody recognizes them. Nobody has seen Daddy, but they identify Robin as Dr. Pepper, who was part of the hospital 2 years ago, and was a kind and enthusiastic surgeon who learned Doc Uzami's techniques. One day, he left without a word to anyone. Kuruko gets wet after finding out that he's still alive, but has to control herself while Uzami shows the patients a settlement where they can shift to, and asks them to begin without him because he will bury Hashio first. Maru and Kuruko stay back to protect him, but feel bad that all of them have to leave the hospital. But the doc points out that most of the facilities were only needed for her. Maru says that there are still many more people who want to be treated by him, but Uzami reveals that he never intended on being a savior of the people. He was originally just devoted to taking care of Hashio, his partner, But one day, a random man third-wheeled them and begged to be treated as well, and slowly, more and more people started trickling in. He only kept making the prosthetics because it always made Hoshio happy, and now that she's no longer here, he has no will to continue doing so. While Maru and Kuruko wait for him to finish burying her on the roof of a building, they talk about how they can finally get some solid information about Robin from Uzami. Suddenly, a gunshot is heard above them, and when they reach the roof, they find Uzami dead with Hoshio by his side. Kuruko cries out in frustration and Maru folds onto his knees and yells out that his hands can only bring death, unlike Uzami and Robin's. Kuruko immediately grabs his hands and tells him that he saves more people's lives than he can imagine by killing man-eaters. After calming down, they find that Uzami is holding a button with the same bird logo as Kuruko's gun. Back in the school, Kano watches Tokyo sleep on his lap and recalls the time when Asura was alive. Back then, he and Asura were super tight and would do everything together despite her ugly looks. She had special powers like levitating off the ground and healing wounds, and she helped Kano learn to use his own powers, which was to see things outside his body. He used that power to make beautiful drawings of strange creatures. One day, Asura entered his room and told him that she had learned the reason she was born and so, she must say goodbye to him. She disappeared without giving any further explanation, but he knew something was wrong, so he rushed out of his room to see her dead body. After she died, he felt nothing but sadness, and Tokyo was the only one to stick by him and continue encouraging him to draw. After thinking back on those days, he feels a sudden sharp sense of dread, and he gets the realization that whoever killed Asura was coming after Tokyo next. The next day, Tokyo is called to the infirmary again for a follow-up health checkup, and even though the nurse assures her that she has nothing to worry about, she is put in a wheelchair and starts being treated like a Make-A-Wish kid. The other kids in class are informed that they will not be seeing Tokyo for a while. Over in hell, Kuruko and Maru figure that the heaven he has been looking for is the same place from where he, Uzami, and the bird logo share their origins. Of course, they have no idea where that is, so they just wander aimlessly. He shows her that the broken tooth has somehow grown back despite it being a permanent tooth. They have no time to process this because a sudden earthquake hits the area, which causes a nearby building to collapse. They go to assess the damage and get jump-scared by the local hippie lunatic called Juchai, who acts like a submissive to them because he thinks they're goons. This offends both of them because he looks like someone who's way more likely to be an organ trafficker. Kuruko shows him the photos and the logo and asks if he knows anything about them or heaven. He hints that he knows something about the logo, but since he is an information broker, he will only tell them if they give him Kuruko's gun. When they decline that, he quickly changes his mind to tell them if they allow him to milk their time and money. Before telling them anything, he repositions his car 2 feet away from where it originally was and acts like nothing happened. First, he gives them a little teaser by explaining the 3 theories that try to explain what caused the Great Disaster. The first is that an asteroid hit Earth which impacted the whole world just like the one that killed all the dinosaurs. The second, made by History TV, is that the man-eaters are actually aliens from outer space who invaded Earth. And finally, the war theory, which states that a terror attack in Japan sparked the beginning of a war, which led to the use of some unknown weapon of unimaginable power. After that, he threatens to leave until they fork out more money. Next, he tells them a horror story from his own life. Back when he was only 12 years old, he stumbled upon a town that was run by dominatrix women and barricaded by walls. If men accidentally entered, they would be killed, except for the rare instances that they liked the men's faces enough to keep them around as pets that they'd use to do all the chores and make babies. Eventually, a 2-women couple picked him to be the father of their child, but unfortunately, the kid turned out to be a boy. Since all male babies were killed, he and the 2 mothers decided to run away together, but they got caught and only he managed to escape. Then, he shows them a tattoo of the number 11 on his arm, claiming that it is proof that his story is true. However, Kuruko smells the bull in the air and rubs the 11 on his arm to find out that it is fake. She points her gun at him and threatens to shoot if he doesn't leave right that instant. After he bolts with his car, she explains to Maru that he was acting way too weird and that he must have repositioned his car before talking to them to hide something. Sure enough, the wall that was being hidden by the car has a board with the apartment number 2F, which is named Takahara Academy and has the bird logo next to it. Once they enter apartment 2F, they find it completely abandoned and in ruins, but it is full of boxes with the same logo. Maru begins losing hope that the logo has anything to do with where he comes from. But Kuruko finds a letter from Takahara Academy's letter that describes the academy as a sort of sanctuary and school for orphans, which promises to protect them from the outside world of hell. The use of the word hell makes her believe that the academy is still a lead worth following and that they should check out the 2 facilities mentioned in the pamphlet. Both the facilities are far away, but luckily Juchai returns with his car and gets on his knees begging for mercy. He shows another 11 tattoo on his shoulder and says that his story was true and that he intends to find out what happened to his child, which is why he had first asked for Kuruko's gun. After Maru confirms the tattoo is real, they agree to join him on his drive to the walled town, since it's very close to the Ibaraki facility on the pamphlet. Once they reach the end of their long road trip, Juchai gives Maru a wig to look like a girl unless he fancies being a dominatrix pet, which makes Kuruko jealous because she's no longer the prettiest trap. They walk toward the so-called wall town but find a big unguarded entrance. Upon entering the main building, they find it's been abandoned for a long time but left in a state as if everyone just disappeared into thin air, with everything in the school kept in proper condition. Kuruko finds someone's journal with daily entries that stop abruptly at a certain date but gets distracted when a sudden chill spreads the room. She sees a big orb of water floating toward Maru, whose back is turned. She pushes him out of the way just in time, but the room continues to dip in temperature until the water on the floor turns to ice and starts spreading all over. She is frozen in her crouching position as the ice covers her, and she pleads to Maru to find the man-eater because her eyes are freezing shut. Maru is also nearly fully frozen but gets a glimpse of a spider-shaped man-eater at the last second and yells out to her that it's on the ceiling. Kuruko and Maru use the last of their strength to point her gun at the ceiling and shoot a beam at it. In an instant, the ice disappears and it feels like summer again. Still, they hear the spider moving on the floor above, so they make a run for it. But Kuruko stops in her tracks because she has a realization. She fills her mouth with water and runs up to where the spider is, trying to provoke an attack from it. The spider appears outside one of the windows and launches another water bubble at her. As the water ball slowly starts freezing, Kuruko spits out the water in her mouth, which breaks the bubble, causing it to freeze before it reaches her. This confirms her suspicion that this man-eater has a certain range where its attacks are effective, and so she fearlessly runs toward it to close the distance and fires a beam. The man-eater's body splits into 2 parts and one half of it escapes. Maru goes down to kill the man-eater, but can't find its core in its head part that fell down, meaning that it's probably still alive and kicking with its other half. Seeing the town has long been deserted, they decide they have no choice but to move on. They tell Juchai with great difficulty that they could not find any clues on the whereabouts of his son, but the man-eater must have only made the school its nest way after the building was abandoned. Just when Juchai seems to lose hope, 2 men approach him and greet him as Boar-11. He looks up and recognizes them as fellow Boar Bros, numbers 6 and 9, from his time at the academy. They tell him that his son is alive and that they're all living somewhere else now. While they drive them there, they explain that one night about a month after he had run away and the mothers had been executed, his son started crying. All the men collectively tried to shut him up in fear that the women would get annoyed and kill him. But it was at that moment that the man-eater invaded the school. Since they were luckily awake, they escaped through the hole the man-eater made to enter the walled town, but the rest didn't make it out. Juchai has a heartwarming reunion with his son Jugo, who is barely old enough to stand up on his own. Maru and Kuruko are welcomed into the Brosphere, and they all have a wholesome barbecue to celebrate. Once the lights are out, they all sleep in separate futons 5 feet apart because no homo, and everything seems to be going well until the room suddenly becomes freezing cold. Kuruko immediately gets on her feet after recognizing the familiar feeling from the school and shouts at everyone to evacuate the house because they are under attack by the man-eater. Everyone except the leader, Juchai, and Jugo get out of the house, but thankfully the leader shows up carrying the child and dragging Juchai, who is unconscious. Kuruko takes the baby and runs away as fast as she can after telling the others to do the same, except she can't seem to escape the cold. She keeps running as long as she can while trying to figure out why the cold keeps following her, but eventually collapses because even her internals have reached deadly low temperatures. Maru runs after her, grabs Jugo out of her hands, and lays him down away from her. The ice immediately begins to melt, and she starts feeling better. She quickly gets up to try and save the baby from the cold, but Maru confusingly tries to stop her. She can't believe he's about to let the kid die, but he claims Jugo is the man-eater, explaining that he can sense its presence inside him. They turn back to see Jugo emerge from the ice dome that formed around him and begin crying, which causes the cold to disappear. Relieved, they carry Jugo back to the Brosphere and explain everything. The next day, Juchai informs them that he will be staying with his son and the bros and gives them his car. They make a charming goodbye and hope to drive off into the sunset, but the car's engine ruins everything by failing. Later that evening, Juchai kills Boar number 9 in cold blood because he was the one who alerted the dominatrixes when he and Jugo's mothers tried to escape, leading to the mothers' executions. He takes the bro's car and escapes again, but this time with Jugo. Back in the school, Tokyo has been kept in isolation after it was discovered that she is pregnant. She sends messages to Kona saying that nobody's explaining what has happened to her, but that she will be released after the thing that's been growing inside her is removed. At the same time, new creepy fifth-year children are introduced to the students in school. As time passes, they warm up to the newbies and everyone seems to be getting along well. Tokyo successfully gives birth to her child, which is an immense relief to the director, who discloses to senior researcher Sawatari her hope of using Tokyo's child to enact her grand plan of creating a pure heaven, since this special child might not fall ill from the disease that eventually affects all the children in the school produced by the mysterious artificial being called Mina. Sawatari reminds the old hag that to do a successful brain transplant, the recipient must at least be 13 years old, which is way more waiting than the time she has remaining. She brushes this off, explaining that she intends to have her brain first transplanted to the newly promoted assistant director Aoshima, and once Tokyo's child is old enough, she will have her brain transplanted into them. Sawatari is appalled by this plan and asks if she has taken the consent of Aoshima, but she replies that consent is a myth to a dominatrix. After that, he shuts up because he knows he can't do anything else. Meanwhile, Mimmeheim notices a girl sitting by herself while everyone else is playing. The girl introduces herself as Oma and explains that she's alone because the others get annoyed by her, which makes Mimmeheim feel bad for her. She befriends Oma and removes her shades, revealing the Gojo Satoru-type eyes behind them. Upon gazing into them, Mimmeheim has a terrifying hallucination where she is brutally killed by sentient machines. She wakes up to find herself in the infirmary with Kano lying down on the bed next to her. She describes the incident to him, explaining that staring into Oma's eyes made her experience her irrational fear of sharp objects like needles come true. She also opens up about her ability to see into the future, but never knows when those events will take place. As she explains it, she has the vision of a nightmarish monster approaching her. Creeped out, she decides to go back to her room, but when she leaves the clinic, she sees Oma waiting for her with her handkerchief. Oma begins crying and apologizes for what happened, which makes Mimmeheim take her shades off again. Oma begs for her shades back, but Mimmeheim already begins seeing the same hallucination, except this time she buries her fear and breaks the illusion. After that, she comforts Oma by saying that she doesn't care about the thing that annoys others, which makes them best friends. The next day, all students are instructed to come to the swimming pool. There, they reunite with Tokyo, who they haven't seen for months. After a while, a robot informs them that they all will soon have to take a long test with the goal of reaching the outside of the outside and fulfilling their roles as Haruko. This seems to make some students feel on edge because the name Haruko seems to awaken some new but familiar feeling inside them. Back in hell, Maru and Kuruko are on their way to the Ibaraki facility when they stumble upon a bustling market stocked with everything you can think of. Maru excitedly looks for the best-looking food but notices Kuruko's attention is somewhere else. He gets ready to beat up the dude she's checking out, but realizes that she is glancing at a stall selling food from her hometown. She snaps back to her normal self in a second and orders 2 portions of stew for them. But the man refuses to take cash because it's illegal to use the old world's currency in the town. He informs them that they can register themselves as visitors at the Ministry of Reconstruction and get 5 chips each for free. Maru has never heard of the Ministry of Reconstruction, so know-it-all Kuruko explains. Back in the day, when she was living as Haruki, Robin told him about the conspiracy theories that all the mysterious disappearances in their town were actually abductions by a rumored Ministry of Reconstruction, who took in people with skills to rebuild human civilization. This proves that the ministry is real, and they're already pretty successful in their goal. They head to the ministry's building, where they're made to fill out hundreds of stupid forms and have their picture taken, after which they get 10 coins in total. Since they have records of everyone in the town, Kuruko shows the 2 photographs to the man at the desk and asks him if he recognizes them. The man points at Robin and asks her for his name, and after she tells him the correct answer and says she's family, he confirms that he is indeed here. The receptionist makes a call and tells her she can meet him at the large filtration plant in 2 hours. Immediately, her heart starts racing while Maru walks away and turns his back to her. While walking to where they're going to stay, she happily blabbers on and on about Robin's big personality while he gives her the silent treatment. Eventually, he tells her to shut up and that he got the hint that she wants to meet her Budokal alone, so she should go ahead. She assures him she'll be back soon with some milk and runs off to the plant where she sees Robin and screams out his name. When their eyes meet, both of them begin to cry. Over in the outside world, Kuruko explains everything to Robin, including that she is a trap, which Robin finds hard to believe but accepts after noticing that her mannerisms are like Haruki's. He explains that he left their hometown to look for Daddy after he disappeared and ended up in Dr. Usami's hospital, where he was helping people until 2 years ago when he found this place. He gives her a tour of the plant, explaining that it's a facility built to filter water from the nearby river, but is also being used to do research on plants and revive the science of agriculture since most of the knowledge about genetic engineering has been lost. After they successfully grew some crops on fertilized fields, many people started settling here, including the Ministry of Reconstruction, making it a self-sufficient town with electricity. Meanwhile, Maru sulks around in the apartment alone and stress eats after imagining what Kuruko and Robin might be up to. Over in heaven, all hell breaks loose, beginning with the Mina system and servers shutting down. All at once, the school's ceiling falls down and explosions go off, which destroy the buildings. The director is the first to run away, revealing she was faking her disability the whole time because she's just lazy. The students run for their lives with Mimiheim in the lead, who orders everyone to take cover in the pool. She noticed a hole was made in the walls, which she wants to check out, and her friends offer to go with her. Kano chooses to stay back and make sure all the younger kids are brought to safety, after which he will look for Tokyo. Mimiheim and her friends crawl through the hole to find a new vast world outside their school, which has a ceiling so limitless that Mimiheim collapses at its sight. After clearing their heads, they realize that this might be part of the test to reach the outside of the outside as Haruko, so they decide to explore by passing through a gap in the fence surrounding them. Once they enter the thick forest ahead, they are jump-scared by big, flying insects and birds. Mimiheim believes that everyone should see this, so she decides to go back with a guy named Shiro and bring everyone including Tokyo, but the dude named Taka and his side continue on their own. Mimiheim and Shiro walk straight to what should be the school but can no longer find the fence. They reach an unfamiliar steep area where she can hear the sound of flowing water, so they follow it to find a river below the cliff they're on. Shiro guesses the river is flowing away from the school, so he recommends they should follow it upstream. But suddenly the ground under Mimiheim gives up, and she goes crashing down. Shiro jumps after her without hesitation and grabs her midair to soften the fall, but gets gravely injured in the process. She screams at him for being so reckless, but he confesses his love for her and promises to always save her no matter what. After hearing him, she starts crying and rips out one of the buttons on her uniform, which has the bird logo on it, and gives it to him. It isn't the bird he really wanted, but it'll do for now. Meanwhile, inside, Aoshima declares to Sawatari that she will initiate the Noah project, which is meant to protect the children. She asks Sawatari to give Tokyo her child, but he's unable to differentiate the two identical babies in the facility and does eeny meeny miny mo to choose which one is hers. He and a nurse go to Tokyo's room to explain that she was pregnant and the baby is hers and Kona's. She holds the baby and finds it cute, so she asks if they can tell Kona as well. Suddenly, the director enters the room with blood all over her and maniacally claims that she's going to win. She walks toward Tokyo like a psych ward patient who escaped from her straitjacket and asks Tokyo to give her the baby. When Sawatari gets in between them, she commands Mina to grab the baby for her. Mina turns into the Terminator and unleashes claws to snatch the baby away, causing Tokyo's life flash before her eyes. She begins feeling a hidden power and lets out a burst of strength which causes veins to grow all over her and the baby. The director tries to touch her, but the veins spread over her as well and a blinding light radiates from Tokyo's body. Over in hell, Maru spends 2 miserable nights alone worrying about when he'll see Kuruko again. When she doesn't return the 3rd day, he decides to bite the bullet and go be a 3rd wheel to her and Robin just to know she's safe. He's stopped from entering by the plant's security, but he's done playing nice and throws the fatties into the river below. He then runs toward the next guy after assessing him, kicking his arm so that he drops his machete and falls down. He takes a couple of punches to his face from the next guy, but knocks him out in a single punch. Finally, he looks around the plant to find Kuruko lying on a bed with her hands tied and thinks he's witnessing one of her freaky kinks, but realizes she's in trouble after seeing the tears in her eyes. Just then, he sees Robin walking toward the room with a coffee tray in his hands and gives him a withering death stare. Robin immediately becomes a pussy and makes a run for it while screaming for help. But since all of his guys are out cold, he's at the mercy of a cold-blooded Maru. He frantically tries to unlock a door but drops the keys and gets cornered like a little rat. After seeing Maru alone, he thinks he is worrying for nothing and tries to simply walk away, except Maru grabs him and pushes him back to the wall every time he tries to walk past him without even looking at his ugly mug. This pisses him off and he goes to punch him, but Maru knocks him out before he can even reach him. After that, Maru picks him up and keeps punching him until Kuruko begs him not to kill him. They leave the plant together and Kuruko curls up by the riverbank to cry because all that she believed in turned out to be a lie. Her time with Robin quickly devolved into him being a super creepy pervert who assaulted her and made her have an identity crisis about who she is. She no longer knows whether she is still Haruki or if Kuruko's thoughts that still reside in this body entered his brain. Maru takes a deep breath and gets ready to be rejected the 10th time. But this time, he assures her that he doesn't give a shit about Haruki and Kuruko, and he just knows that he's in love with the person in front of him. He asserts that he loves the person who's been there for him, who has saved him and taught him to do everything right and promises to always protect her. His words make Kuruko break down and hug him while reminding him that protecting is her job as his bodyguard. After she calms down, they sit together by the riverbank and she rips up the photograph of Robin and casts it in the wind. Maru thinks to himself that the next time he sees Robin, he'll kill the guy. Later, the Ministry of Reconstruction sends investigators to check on the plant who discover that the place has been abandoned. After finding blood on a wall, they suspect foul play and unlock a door with the keys found on the floor. Upon shining their flashlight, they come across the terrifying sight of a woman attached to a monster. They try to inspect the shell of a human more closely, but everybody is gangster until the monster starts wriggling. Meanwhile, Kuruko and Maru speed off into the sunset to continue their search for heaven. If you liked this video, you would love this idiot, who becomes the new demon lord and saves his school from destruction.